Good morning. Welcome back to my channel, Rosa Technocrat. Today we are going to talk about how to set up an application on a Fortiweb, how to troubleshoot Fortiweb, basic troubleshooting, and I will be showing you all the steps that you need to perform while doing the configuration of a web application behind Fortiweb. We will only be talking about the basic setup, not about the security modules or web protection profile. Let's start. Be used in further videos, and all our Fortiweb video series will contain troubleshooting each and every module, different kinds of issues, and all the possible issues that you can expect or I have seen based on my experience. The SSL errors, the certificate errors, all those errors will be coming up in all the future videos. So today our main focus is basic setup and basic troubleshooting. I will be showing you how this topology will be created. How to set up this or how to set up a application. So from a FortiWeb, my server is reachable, my client is reachable. You can see. Okay. Before configuring an application behind FortiWeb, what we need is we need a virtual IP, service port, and backend server pool. So here you can see my client is connected to the internet, which is connected to FortiWeb, and backend actual server pool we have this. So based on the theory or based on the requirement, what we need is we need a virtual IP. Virtual IP is one of the IP addresses that we need to configure it on FortiWeb, and the IP on which the outside client will send the request to. So that is called the virtual IP. Then we need the service port on which port the service will be listening on FortiWeb or the service is running on. So HTTPS, for example, 443 or 80, this we need to bind. That is called the service port. And the backend server pool is a single server or multiple servers or a group of servers which are providing the same service, part of the same service cluster. So that is called the server pool. And this server pool you have to bind against the virtual IP, which in turn will be accessed by the client. This is just a basic setup. There might be like firewalls or any other routing device in between. This is from a layer 3 perspective or how the traffic flows perspective. How we have to perform the configuration is first we have to create an virtual IP. So that you can say step 1. So virtual IP is nothing but you just have to define the IP address that is accessible over the internet on particular port. This flow can be configured from individual menu options or directly from server policy configuration. That I will show you when during the lab. What does it mean? So you have to create a VIP, bind the VIP to a virtual server. That is the second step. Bind the VIP to a virtual server. And then you have to create protected host names. Protected host names is an optional configuration. Optional means if you want to restrict the traffic just based on a specific URL or a specific domain, then you can specify the protected host names that are behind this VIP or that you will host behind this virtual IP. So that is optional. Once this server pool is created, then you have to bind the VIP, the virtual server, and the server pool all together using a HTTP server policy. So this is how the flow or the configuration flow is on a FortiWeb. Creating a virtual IP is like going under the network virtual IP, and you just have to create the IP address. That's it. So it's nothing like too complicated. It's just creating an IP address. So that is the virtual IP. And then using the HTTP server pool policy, we have to bind all these together, like the virtual server, VIP, with which port, the service listening on, and what is the deployment mode of the server policy. Web protection profile is the important function or the main function of a FortiWeb. So for now, we will not be binding a web protection profile. So web protection profile is something where all the security inspections or the different kind of security checks that are being done on that virtual IP or that application. So that is defined in the web protection profile. For now, we will not be defining a web protection profile and will continue without web protection profile. So all these are binded together using the server policy. So this is a basic troubleshooting flow. So with comparison to the configuration flow. So as we have created a VIP, we know like we should check if the VIP is reachable from the client or are you able to telnet to the server. Then if you have created the protected host names or if you are accessing the application using the host name, then is your website name resolving to an IP address. Same way, if is your server pool status up or is the service listening on the server? So that is also a part of basic troubleshooting. Is it being blocked because of web protection profile or because of any security policy? So these are like basic checks on FortiWeb. Enable traffic logging. This I will explain you in the lab. So what happens is by default, uh, FortiWeb does not logs traffic event or traffic logs. It only logs the security or the attack logs, but it does not records the traffic log because traffic logs are high and consumes a lot of disk space. And by default, traffic is not logged onto FortiWeb. So when we want to take a packet capture on a FortiWeb, so packet capture is taken by using a diagnose network sniffer command, and then you have to apply the filters. It is similar to a FortiGate firewall. The only thing is there is a small change in the syntax. On FortiGate, we don't have this network command. Instead, it's diag sniffer packet. But here you have to add the network before that. It is similar to FortiGate. The filters work similar to FortiGate. So we have to specify the command diagnose network sniffer, the port number, and the filters here. So in my case here, I have not applied any filters. So if you don't want to apply any filter, you just have to mention none, and it starts taking the packet captures on FortiWeb. This is how we enable the debug flow on FortiWeb. So debug flow is enabled by using the command diag debug flow. So this is the main command diag debug flow, and then filters. So you can apply different filters under that, and filters can be based on the client IP, server IP, flow detail, module detail, reset, session detail. So based on all these, you can apply the filters to enable the debug flow. But the main important or the always to be applied filters are the client IP and the server IP mostly, because in a production network you might have huge traffic, and if you just enable the debug flow, you will not be able to get all the relevant data, and it will dump the logs for all the applications. So you should apply filters based on the client IP and the server IP. So once you have applied the filters, for example, diag debug flow and client IP filter, server IP filter, all these, once these are applied, if you run the command diag debug flow, so it will show you all the filters that you have applied. So I have applied the filters based on this IP address as the client, this is the server. These are how much detail I want. So 0 to 7 are the debug levels that I want part of this. So once you verified the filters, you just have to do diag debug enable. So after this, you have to do diag debug enable. Once and as soon as you do diag debug enable, you will be able to see all the flow debugs for the traffic that you are filtering. From the flow debugs, you will be able to identify which core or which proxy is handling or you can see here which proxy is handling this particular traffic. You will be able to identify the web server policy that is hitting and session accept, from which IP it is coming, which port to what destination. So in the debug flow, you will be able to see there is a client and servers in front of these lines. So that means this log lines are specific to the traffic coming in from client to the FortiWeb, and server is from FortiWeb to the backend server pool. So from this debug flow, you will be able to see what is the actual physical server it is binded to. I mean, the traffic flow is being sent to which particular backend server based on the algorithm chosen or the round robin mechanism, whatever that you are using, if it is server balance. So the debug flow tells us all about like how the traffic is flowing from client to the backend server, and this helps in detail uh, for identifying what could be the possible issues in case of any errors here. Let's start our labbing. Go. I'm on the FortiWeb now. So what we have to do is the first thing we mentioned was specifying a virtual IP. So you have to go under network, virtual IP. So under the virtual IP, you create a virtual IP. Okay, let me create one more for you. You have to create one virtual IP. So you can say my web service or Rosa Web IP. Okay, Rosa Web VIP. Okay, and you have to specify the IP address, the virtual service that it will listen on, and bind this IP address to which port. For example, outside in my case. So I have to bind this. Okay, it says duplicate entry has already exist. That means this name virtual IP entries already exist. So you cannot have two virtual IP with the same name. So I can say VIP1. Click create. Okay, so the virtual IP is created here. So this is just the creation of the virtual IP. Then you have to go under uh, server, virtual server objects, virtual server, and you have to create a virtual server. So virtual server is nothing but just the binding of the uh, virtual IP to a virtual server. So I will say Rosa VS1 for example and say create. OK. So under the virtual server, what you do is you just call the existing object VIP1 and status is enabled. So you can enable disable the status of this virtual server. That means if you temporarily want to disable a virtual IP to be listening on, you can just set the status of this virtual server to be disabled, or enable disable can be done. So now we have binded the virtual IP to the virtual server and click OK. So once you have done this, you have to create a server pool. Okay. Server pool, I already have multiple server pools created, but still I will show you and later on I can use this. Okay. So let's create one server pool. What we have to do is in the server pool, you have to define a server pool name, Rosa srvr pool 1, for example, and click OK. So once you click OK, you have to specify the members of the pool. So member can be one all the servers that serves the similar purpose 192.168.0.10, 11, 12. For this is one of the server, for example, and there can be multiple servers inside this, right? So now if you see here, it's not giving me create new option because I have selected single server slash server. So I have selected single server. If I select server balance and then I select a method, I mean, I will change to server balance and click OK. Then you can specify multiple servers here. So now I have to specify, for example, 192.168.1.10. Okay, one of these I just created, and 192.168.1.20 created. So now these are different members of the server pool. Okay, and what will be the load balancing mechanism to forward the traffic in the server pool is the load balancing algorithm. So under load balancing algorithm, you have to select the method. It can be round robin, weighted round robin, least connection. So these are the different load balancing algorithms. And you can also apply a server health check, what kind of health check you want, that is under server health check. For now, we are not going to do those things. Okay, so now this is how we create a server pool. Under the server pool, you have to set status enable, port. So once this server pool is created, okay, it can be either a single server, server balance. You have to choose the load balancing algorithm, the persistence, and you have to create the server pool. So once this server pool is created, now let us go to the policy and the server policy. So in the server policy, what we have to do is, right. So in the server policy, one is the deployment mode. So deployment mode is, there are two types of deployment mode. It can be either single server or server balance or the HTTP content routing. So what is the difference between both of these is, if you say single server server balance, it is just forwarding the traffic to the server pool that you have defined here based on all the traffic received on the virtual IP. So the virtual IP we are binding here. But if you select HTTP content routing, then you can forward the traffic to a specific or different server pools depending on the HTTP headers or the host names, or based on any condition that you want to do. So the HTTP content routing is forwarding the traffic to a backend server pool based on different conditions matched from the HTTP header. So that is the content routing policy method. For now, we will use single server server balance, bind the virtual server that we created, and the server pool that we created. So once you bind the VIP to the VIP virtual server and server pool, and you just have to say OK. That means apply this server policy. We will not be talking about web protection profile or all of these. This is the important or the most important module, or everything on Fortiweb is related to the web protection profile. For now, we are not applying a security protection profile. So I just created the server policy and say click OK. So once the server policy is created, so now your application should be accessible and running. If I go to my client machine, that is 1066, and if I access my application 1066, yeah, so my application is now accessible. If you go under log access traffic, you see all the traffic logs. Okay. In the PPT, I was mentioning about the logging. So on the log, if you go log config, other log settings. So here, this is the point, enable traffic logging. By default, FortiGate does not logs the traffic. It only logs attack log and other event logs, but not the traffic log. So whenever you are creating first time, you should enable this option if you want the traffic to be logged. So by default, FortiWeb does not log traffic log, and it is recommended to keep it disabling unless you have a syslog server or some third-party logging mechanism, because otherwise it is going to consume a lot of disk space on your FortiWeb. So generally we recommend like you should not enable traffic logging unless necessary. So once this is applied, you will be able to see all the logs under log policy. Okay. After this, so now you see we have created the server policy, binded the virtual IP, binded the virtual server, and the service is accessible now. Okay. Now coming to the troubleshooting part, how you can take packet capture. So if you go under system, network, packet capture. So this is one of the options where using GUI you can take a packet capture, like specify the interface, the filter, host 10, 66, 66, 11 for example, and start the packet capture. So this is how you can take a packet capture on GUI, or else on uh, CLI you have to use the command diagnose network sniffer and then the port number, and you have to apply the filters. So host 10, 66, 66, 11 and port 80 for example. You have to specify the filter. Oops, sorry, because of the double quotes, it missed. Diag network sniffer port 1 host 10, 66, 66, 10 and port 80. Okay, so now the sniffer is started. You have to just access the application, and if you see the packet coming in, why not? If you access the application, you see the traffic. So this is how you take packet captures on a FortiWeb using the CLI. Now I have told you how to take on GUI on CLI, and now how to enable the debug flow on FortiWeb. So to enable the debug flow, you have to do diag debug flow filter, and you can use these different filters. And when you want to start the flow, you have to do diag debug flow trace start and diag debug enable. Okay, so once you enable this and if you access the application, you will be able to see all the debug flow for the client and the server communication. So as explained during the PPT, the policy, the server, everything is visible here based on the debug flow and what exactly is happening with the traffic flow. That also can be seen from the debug flows. Coming back, so if you go under server objects, server pool, so you see your server pool here, and you can see whether it's enabled, disabled, and okay, apart from server pool status, you should also be able to telnet the service. So telnet, if I have it or not, I don't know. On the client, let me check if I have a telnet. Yeah, I have a terminal. So if I do a telnet on 10.66.66.11 on which port 80, so it's connected. Okay, so this is, you should always check whether service is listening or not. Hope this video helps you in a basic setup of application, and will come soon with a detailed video on each module and different troubleshooting scenarios or the issues that can be seen on FortiWeb. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for watching. Please do like and subscribe. Thank you.